Hello everybody, welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to be talking about some tips and tricks that we can be using when we're using Vista in a touring situation. As usual, I'm going to be taking you through this afternoon's session, and Ben's going to be on the chat answering any questions that you might have. So just give it a few seconds just to let some people come in. I think we're pretty much there on that. We'll just wait for Dimitri to join and then we'll kick these off. Cool. So welcome everybody. I thought I'd just start by giving you a little demonstration of a show file that was actually from the programmer and lighting director Steve Hayward, who's recently been working on the Keen show. I'll do a shout out to Louisa Smurthwaite, the lighting designer for that show as well. He's kindly let us take a look at his show file today, just to, I guess, stress the importance that I want to point out for show file organization. Of course, it's completely up to you how you want to set up your screens, but I just thought I'd show you what Steve likes to look at when he's running the show. So I guess first and foremost is he's got the playback screen on the left. So within one screen, you can see all of his cue lists and what cues running in the actual show itself. Over on the right-hand side as well, he's got a number of snapshots. Now, this show file's quite big. This particular tour has over 50 songs that they could pull from every night, and typically they don't know the set order because the band like to just chuck in new songs and ask the audience to shout out songs that they want to play. So Steve really has to be quite organized in how he's set up his show file to be able to deal with those instant changes. And the way that he's doing that primarily is through the use of snapshots. We have gone through this in previous webinars, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, but I did want to demonstrate it in a fully fleshed out show. So all these songs, and all he has to do to play, for example, Crystal Ball, is just simply click Crystal Ball. That will trigger off the first cue, and in his console pages it's actually loading in the cue list into his main super playback controls here as well. So whatever snapshot he's running, for example, Snowed Under now triggers that preset state, and all of his pages have changed to do that. So all he has to do is just concentrate on this main playback button. All of his cue specific stuff or song specific stuff is being triggering off S1 pages with various different bumps and specials and that type of stuff. And he has other control services for things like front washers and that type of stuff, using some group inhibits as well, which we could talk about in this webinar. Actually, I don't think we've covered those in any of the others. Another thing that we can really see in use here is when we go down to the cue list section is the use of pages. So you can see each song has its own page with the key cue lists and things that are needed for that in there. So really good show file organization. And the way that you can add a new page to any quick picker component is right click and press add new page. So let's just call this Vista for now. You get an empty page, and the way that you drag stuff in here is you have to go and find it in another component and then drag and drop. And the way you do that is by holding down the Alt or Options key on the keyboard or the green modifier key on your console and drag these in here. And that's how you can start to organize your show. Speaking to Steve earlier, one thing that he did say Vista was great for touring is one, the compact size of consoles like the S1, EX, or M1s and MVs. He can get all these in a single pelly case, and he can fly with that anywhere in the world. So he can actually go with him on planes and still have all of his power and control at his fingertips when he gets there to site. Another thing that he mentioned was just the speed at which you can edit cues within Vista by working within the sort of live edit views of cue list, just be able to jump through these. Like I said, he is updating about 50 songs every single time he gets to a new venue. So I guess that's credit to Vista's speed of workflow. So yeah, that was just a little demonstration about the importance of show file organization and how you can make your life easier when you actually turn up to new venues. Are there any questions about what we're seeing on this screen? Because what I'd like to do now is actually just jump back to the normal Vista demo show file that we've been using in the rest of the webinars.
Nope, no questions on that.
Cool. So with that, I will open up my my other show somewhere here. Cool. I'm just going to bring my wig screen over as well so you guys can see. Oops, what's happening here? Excellent. Great. So of course, one of the most useful things when touring a show file is the use of presets. We have covered these in one of our early webinars, but of course they're reference points for all of your cues and songs. So the idea is that when you get to a venue or you change from one place to the next, all you have to do is update these reference points, and these reference points will then automatically update all of your cue lists, which are calling on this information. So that's a really important thing to actually make sure that you're programming using these. Otherwise, you're going to have to update potentially thousands of cues every time, which is not desirable. So two of the main features that I want to talk about in this webinar are cloning fixtures and fixture swapping fixtures. So we can talk about cloning to begin with, and to do that, I'm just going to delete 5 of these spots out of my show file. So let's delete these. And we'll just program a quick cue list just for demonstration purposes. So let me put these a little bit forwards. Let's go to a fan out shape. In fact, we'll do a little cross instead. Just programming a couple of examples that we could see here. I'll just do a circle effect on this one. And I'll stop the intensity just to make that a little bit clearer. So just a few things. Some of them I have programmed with presets, namely this white singer. And then we'll do cyan circle up in the air, just to demonstrate how the console works. So this look here and this look are not presets, but the third one is. So what cloning is basically doubling. It's used for if you program the show and you turn up at a venue where there's more lights, or perhaps you're doing the big final show of the tour and you might need to increase the rig size, and cloning allows you to do that without having to reprogram all of those additional lights manually. So in this example, I'm going to clone 5 Vipers to become 10. The way that we do that is we simply select them, we go into the patch screen, right click, and there's an option to clone fixtures just here. So when we click this, we'll get the double of that. So the same again, and they will drop to the fixture pool, and then we can repatch them. So if we select them, we can then drag and drop to anywhere else, and they'll be patched here, and they'll start coming online. Notice the names have been cloned as well. It's Viper 1, Viper 2, and so on and so forth. If I jump back to my fixture chooser view, in this particular layout settings, I've turned off the manage layout settings to, in fact, they should still be on there. They should be down the bottom. Yeah, here they are. So I may just need to drag these back into a certain place. That'll do. So you can see that even by using a generic model, it's just copied this. So they've gone to the same tilt location. Same thing for the cross. Of course, the position of the singer is cloned. Because Vista doesn't know where these fixtures are, you would have to manually update that position yourself. Of course, you could do it outside of a Q list edit. So of course, the workflow would normally be put all the lights in their singer preset and then just tweak these around. So what you'd have to do in the workflow process is just step through these. So if I quickly just pop these back over here, you'd just be clicking through them. I'm just clicking my next and previous fixture arrows just to bump through these, pop those over there. And then of course, once you're happy with that, you would update this preset with this fixture information. And of course now, because we've done that, when we edit, I'll take a look at and play back that cue list again, it's now going to be referencing the correct point. So that's why presets are useful. When we come up to the effect queue, in this example, it's actually cloned it. So you can see 1 and 6 and 2 and 7 are doing the same thing. It's a clone. So if you've got effects running in QList, what you might need to do, depending on how the show is, you might need to just bump through the queues, go into the edit of this, open up the effect, and then select the entire line. And then in the sequence tab, you may need to just press update selection so that it's no longer a clone, it's a recalculation of that running across the entire thing. So it just depends on how that's working, really. It's completely up to you. Of course, sometimes they might not be cloned to the same truss. They might be going in as a floor package or underneath the screens or something like that. Does that make sense to everybody?
Looks like it. No questions right now.
Cool. So because I've just cloned it, I'm actually going to open up my show file again just to go back to where I was before. So the next thing to talk about is, of course, fixture swapping. So with this, I'm going to delete these pointers. And show you an example here. So in this example, I've got all of these 10 lights on this rig. And in this next example, I'm just going to swap 5 of them just to show you the feature, because I can't change my wig fixtures, but I can change the truss by swapping to the pointers which are on this truss just up here. So in this example, I've got all my fixtures on my singer. I mean, if I show you some other presets, I've got things like the brass section over here and the bassist, and of course all of the other positions as well. So what I can do is you can make a fixture selection and you can change your selection to a different fixture type. So this show, these Vipers aren't available, but pointies are, or something like that. So to do this, again, done from the patch, you right click and you press change fixture type. There's 2 options here. Change fixture type is just changing the currently selected fixtures, which in this example is these 5. And change fixture type of all selected would just change all fixture types of this show for the other one. Typically, I find myself using this one before. When you click this, another patch search almost pops up, a little window, and we can still use the exact same method of being able to find a fixture and select it. Once we're happy with our selection, you hit OK, and this will then be swapped out for this fixture. This does show you a warning message because this action can't be undone. So of course, a good tip as always is save your show file. For example, show file and the venue name, save that throughout the day. Then when you get to the next venue, save it as a different name. Particularly when you're about to do a fixture swap, save for the knowledge you can go back should anything not quite work out the way that you expected. So you hit yes. Depending on your show file size, you may see a pop-up sort of progress bar. Fixture swapping is incredibly processor heavy. The application has to go and figure out what it needs to do for all of those fixtures in all of your queues. So sometimes it might take a minute, but you will see a progress bar. Once this fixture swap is completed, these fixtures again go down to the pool. Don't be put off by the fixture name. This is just the name that you've given it before. In this case, it was Viper 6, Viper 7, but it could be, Singer or whatever it is. They're actually pointers, though. We can show you that by actually clicking to it just here. And I patched those to the wrong address. I think it's 381. There we go. Cool. So we've fixture swapped, and you can see immediately everything starts working using the generic fixture model. So we're in the cyan color, even though we did all of our programming on a CMY fixture. We're now working with a color wheel only fixture. So all of that stuff just works instantly. If I just show you the preset, so this is a Singer preset. Obviously, it's about the right position, but it's more forwards because this truss is more downstage from this one. If I show you the bassist, again, it's a little bit off. And the keys, oops, wrong one. Brass. Again, it's a little bit off there as well. So I could just go and update all of these presets manually. So I could take the fixtures, I could reposition them on the Singer and update it, and then do the same for every other position in my show. But what you could also use is something called a transform to help you. The example that I'm showing you here is quite extreme because the truss probably isn't going to move too far. You're probably going to be hanging lights in a similar situation every show. They might just be in a slightly different place. Normally not something as extreme as this, but you never know. So a little tip that I could give you, or something that you might want to experiment with, is using transforms just to kind of nudge the fixtures back to a point to begin with, and then you're much closer when you actually get to doing your other preset edits. Let me see if I can demonstrate this quickly for you. So let's just take those guys down a little bit. So if I select this fixture in the patch screen, what we can do is we can use a transform and go to the advanced. And if I add in a tilt transform, what I should be able to do is just offset that. And now I can just use the up and down arrows on my keyboard just to nudge this back a little bit. I might need to add a little bit of a pan offset here as well. So I'll just nudge that in. Okay, so that's now pretty much there. Do the same for the others. So again, just add the tilt. This one will need a pan as well. They all will. It's just take me a couple of minutes just to do this. So again, just using the arrow keys. Oops. Just going to rough it in a little bit. Obviously, you can spend a little bit more time making it perfect. But the idea with this is once you've done these sort of adjustments at the patch level, is your other presets should then be much closer to where they should be for you to make smaller tweaks, hopefully then working faster as you go through your entire show and update all of the other presets. So let's just do this now, like this. So what we should now see when we do this is they should all be just a little bit closer to where they should have been before. Again, this example is not perfect because the truss is almost straight ahead, but you can see that's much closer to where it was before when it was somewhere spread out over here. So that's just something that you could try on some of your tours. It's just something to think about. Particularly pan offset is useful if the riggers haven't quite rigged the rig straight. They very rarely get it dead straight. So you can just nudge some angles in. You don't have to go and update all of your presets. Just if one fixture's not shooting straight, you can just have the pan offset in there, which is the main bit of what I wanted to just demonstrate there with that example. Are there any questions on that, Ben, in the chat?
No, no questions on that.
Just going to load in my image file again. Just going to I'm going to point out Vista's behavior when you're copy and pasting stuff, and indeed fixture swapping. It's something that does happen, but I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. If you go to patch and customize gobo and color wheels, I can show you how this is working. So here, for example, the dot gobo, you can see that our library of gobos are actually categorized. So this is wheel 1 slot 1, and its category is a dot. If you copy and paste this or fixture swap between different fixtures, the console's not necessarily going to choose wheel 1 slot 1 for that fixture type that you're working on at that time. It will look to the category to see if that is possible to do a closer match than just wheel 1 slot 1, and it's using the categories to do this. If the category is not defined, then it will indeed go to wheel 1 slot 1, so that can help you a little bit as well. It's just something to bear in mind when you are fixture swapping and moving along. It's also important to mention that when you're moving along the tour and you're saving your show files, if you fixture swap something out, for example, go from a Mac Viper to a different manufacturer fixture, a Robe, for example, just because you've swapped it, it doesn't mean that the console's forgotten all of the information it previously was about the Viper. It actually keeps that stored, kind of hidden from you in its show file, just in case at some point in the future you fixture swap back to that Viper again. You don't have to go back to the Viper show file and merge in what you're doing before. It does retain it and keep hold of it. So as soon as the point you fixture swap back to the Viper, it already knows what exact sort of presets and gobos you liked for that fixture because it's stored it. And that's actually one of the show cleanup tools, which would be to delete redundant fixture data. So that simply means if the fixture is no longer in the show file patched, remove it, forget about it, at which point then of course it doesn't remember what it's been before. These show cleanup tools can also be really handy, certainly if you've been touring a show file for many years and you just keep building on top of it. These can help to kind of reduce that unneeded information and help the show file run that little bit smoother, certainly if you're processing hundreds of thousands of events like we're seeing in the Keen show file just a little bit earlier. Any questions on that, Ben?
No questions on that. However, a question did come up about the differences between save copy as and save show as.
Yes, that is a very good question. So let's take a look at it. So what save show as? So currently I'm working in Vista demo show file. Imagine I've named this as like the venue that I'm working in today. We're in United Kingdom show. If I do a save as, what happens is I'm saving saving a new show file. So I'm taking a save of it at that point and pressing save, but the show file I'm working on is now save as. So it's not the show file I was in before. I've completely changed show file at this point in time. So I'm now working in save as. Whereas what save copy as does is it would, well, firstly, it asks you if you want to include the video or images in this show file, um, just to reduce the show file size of this. Now, the video and images are typically stored in your show resource folder. So if you're always going to be opening the copies as on the same machine that you created it on, you don't need to worry that the video and images aren't being stored in the show file itself, because they will be pulled from the show resources folder. This option is just there to slimline your save copy as. So you can save hard drive space or flash disk space or whatever you need to do. But anyway, the save a copy as allows you to save a snapshot of what you're working on now and kind of put that off in a different location, and you don't remain working that. So for now, for example, I could call this 2 p.m. So I'm saving as, I want to do a manual backup at 2 o'clock UK time, save it. It saved it, but I'm still working in save as. That's the difference. And to be honest, I use save copy as a lot more than I do save as, because I want to be working in the master show file for this particular show, which is save as, but I want to be manually doing my own saves copy as somewhere else. Doesn't make any sense?
Yes, I think so. Can you do a quick demonstration of what remove redundant events will do?
Yes. This is another one that I find myself using quite a lot. Okay, so I've just done some purposely poor programming there. So in this example here, in queue number 1, I've got intensity and position, so full and singer. In queue 2, I've also programmed singer. And in queue number 4, I've also programmed at full. And the same again in queue 5. So I've purposely done that. So basically, what remove redundant queue list events does is it deletes any event that doesn't need to be in the queue list for the look of the queue. So if I press tools and remove redundant queue list events, all of those events that didn't need to be in the list are automatically removed for me. So it just helps slimline that. One, it helps the show file size and processing, because the queue list playback will still process those events even though you're not seeing anything change on stage, because it's the same. So helps limit down. It's good for troubleshooting because I can see, hey, this is tracking through here. I'm not getting confused about any other event. And there's nothing unusual there. Often when you're programming, certainly if you're experimenting with looks, you can end up with stuff in there that doesn't need to be. Or indeed, if you're copying and pasting between queues, then you can end up with duplicate events in there that just don't need to be there.
I think that was a great example.
Do you have any other questions? Yeah.
No other questions.
Just thinking what else I could show you in terms of the topic of touring. I mean, that's the main things there are presets, transforms, and being able to fixture swap and clone, and of course how to save and back up. We did talk about this yesterday, but just in case any of you missed it, we do have an autosave tab, and one of the new features in Vista 3 is the ability to back up to an external, automatically back up to an external device. By default, it's in your same shows folder, in a backups folder, but this could be a remote flash drive as well. This isn't to do with touring, of course, this is to do with all show files. It's good to have the external backups all the time. Not to replace manual storing by save or save copy as or save as, of course, but it's good to know that those features are there should you need them. What if I missed, Ben? What else can we talk about? We've talked about most of the other features in the other webinars, but go on.
How about cloning and fixture swapping together? So clone a fixture, swap a fixture, and then keep it in your pool and swap back and forth.
That is possible. So let's do a similar example again. We'll delete these just so I've got stuff to demonstrate. For a different go, but okay, so first we'll clone these. So we right click and clone. We get a clone of this, and of course you can clone these as well. So if you had more than 5 that you want to duplicate out to, you could clone those as well. So now we've got 10 that we can just pop in there, and we can also change these. So we've cloned them, but let's say they're not the Viper spots, but they're actually the pointies that we were using earlier. It's going to ask me to do that. So we can search for these. Yes, I do want to do that. Stays here in the pool.
And while you're there, can you also rename them as well?
Yes, you can. So rename fixtures. So I'm now going to call these the pointies. I'm going to use the magic hashtag just to number those for me. And I think, is it 261? Yeah, there we go. So we cloned, and then we cloned again to get 10, and then we fixture swap the 10 to bring these online as well. So anytime those fixtures are used, I don't think I've got any other. It's going to look terrible, but yeah, so they're doing the same. You can see the beams are doing the same thing as what the spots were doing before in all of these queues. So they've instantly placed in all of the queues that you've cloned them from, which is the whole purpose of it. Of course, you still can manually go back in here and adjust and tweak, just like normal standalone fixtures. At that point, you can still change stuff, but it just saves you having to manually program these fixtures from the beginning. So it's a useful thing.
One of the things I like about cloning and then swapping the fixture type is that you keep the original fixture in the show too. So if you do need to swap to a different fixture, but it's a one-time thing, you don't necessarily want to swap them back and forth all the time. You can clone it, swap it, and then put the originals back later on.
Yeah, and some users like to do that. So they just have a rig which is purely there for cloning out and actually using, but it's personal preference and how you like to do that. There's no right or wrong way of doing it.
So beyond that, chat has been very quiet. I don't know if anyone else has any questions on this. We've got lots of time. This is our last scheduled webinar, so this would be the time if there's any questions that have come up.
I was going to mention group inhibits quickly.
Okay.
So with this example, let's say that we've got a queue here. Let's say, who cares what's happening? So here this queue is programmed at 100%. If we just did some other examples of what's happening here with this, so let's go back up to 70% here in this too. I'm just going to make a group of these two fixtures. Here he is. So with this is my cue list that I've just stored, and obviously the lights are reading at their program values in here. With groups, if I find my group fader and bring this in over here, normally this would be a HTTP fader. So in these last two examples, I'd be able to increase and decrease the intensity of this. So we're going up on a HTTP basis. But sometimes useful is the ability to change this group fader type to become a scale minus, so inhibitive. So what this does here is at the top, this is at the programmed level. It doesn't matter what the queue is. So it's 100%. You can start to, oops, you can start to scale that back if you need to. So we can scale him back. Same thing for the other ones. We're always scaling back from the program value, which might be useful if you've got things like your front wash programmed into all of your cues for colors and whatever. But if you do need to just ride certain band members or certain parts of the show, then you can use groups and inhibits to do that. Not just a touring feature, of course, that's useful in all sorts of situations, TV studios, corporate events, whatever.
So we've had a couple questions pop up here. I'm going to start with one here. What happens to the groups when you clone fixtures? Because that's probably a good question there. When you have fixtures and you clone them, if it's the same fixture type, it will remain in the same group.
It depends on what groups you're using as well. So let's just do an example of that. So here is the singer group, let's say, which is a group that I made of just these two. I do also have this first group, which is the auto group that Vista makes, is this one here. So if we take a look at that, let me just clone these two. Clone. So we've now got clone of those two. It is in that. So even in your custom ones, so I just made it of these two, because they're a clone, it is selecting all four. And on top of that, the auto groups will also be selecting just the Vipers. So it does include groups.
And I think if I understand the second question there about that is, when you clone fixtures, they will pop up on your layout at the end if it's set to auto show new fixtures.
Correct, yes. So if this is unchecked, you'd have to go in there and find the fixtures manually. If you're fixture swapping, then they'll just take the place of the icons as they are in each layout. Whereas if you're cloning and basically adding new fixtures, then you have to add them in yourself if it's unticked.
Yep, excellent. Question before that, explain stealth. Do a quick example of stealth.
Quick example of stealth. It's
Yeah.
like a programmer blind. So, for example, if I'm in the singer, say in a blue, with stealth, what I'm able to do is that I'm able to do completely different things, such as go up in the air here and do this. I can add some live time as well. So now when I come out of stealth, we're going to crossfade from the blue stage look to my new look, like this. So I crossfade, and then I could do stealth again, and I could come down to white, go to my band members and go. So it's just a way of crossfading between two different programmer looks.
For anyone who's older, this is a two-scene preset right there.
Yeah,
This is a modern two-scene preset
yeah,
way
it's
of
a
running
good
the console.
A and B. Um, Another good example, again, going back to what Steve Hayde was saying he likes about Vista for touring, is just this visual workflow. You know, even without a visualizer, you're able to sit on a train or an airplane and really see how your show is playing back before you even get to site. You can be updating stuff easily just on a computer on Mac without any hardware needed. You can do all console operations just from keyboard or pointing device.
And the last question here was just updating the home position, I guess a home preset, which it does tie in with touring if you want to update a home preset.
Anyway, so from here we just set where we want the lights to be. We could even add in some CT, for example. So once you've set the look, you right click, you come down to home, and you press update, just like anything else. So we want to update position, color, and say beam in this example. So we do that, and then if we change, take out lifetime for a second. When we now clear, we're not going to go into the fixture home preset. We're going to come down to the show file default preset, which is this position here in white with a little bit of CT. So we're always coming up in this nice warm white, not the cool white. Of course, you could add intensity in there as well if you want to do, but typically I think most operators would prefer to, oops, wrong button, would prefer to have that on group faders like this.
One other question was brought about stealth is recording stealth to a cue. I can't remember if we're able to record the look in stealth to a cue.
Let's try it. So if we go to stealth, I don't see why not. We're going to go blue up in the air in a gobo, and I'm going to store list 5. And if we come out of that, and we edit this 5, no intensity I didn't store in there because that was coming from the group, but yeah, there you go. So you can, which makes sense.
There you go. Yeah, so
it's blind. It's still the blind function, and it was just renamed, I think, in version 2.3 to stealth because we added the visual element of that along with QView. And that's another thing with it's kind of linked to stealth. If you wanted to do stuff blind on the fly within a queue list, the default is if you click the plus, you're immediately changing something in the queue, because what happens when you click the plus is the console immediately plays into it, so you can change it. Whereas if you want to do that blind, the way to do that is press QView, then click the plus, then you can start changing stuff without having it play in to the next one. So that's another little tip there.
that's a good one because that's creating a queue in blind without having to.
Yeah, so if you're already in the edit tab, click queue view, then you can create new queues without having them played in automatically. Whereas if you're in the live tab, you can use stealth like we just demonstrated.
Well, that has answered the questions.
Any more?
I do not see any right now. I assume that means we've answered everyone's questions so far. I don't know if there's anything else.
I don't have any other topics on my list today. Obviously, if we would have started with the touring webinar, we'd have loads to talk about more about presets, but we have covered all of the other building blocks in our previous sessions, I think.
Yeah, I can't think of much else that there is. We have covered a lot. We've covered things multiple times, which is helpful because you can see different ways of coming about it. If you're using QView, you can't move to a queue in the playback window. Well, you can, and the playback's going to take it live, though. It's not going to take it in QView.
Not sure I follow the question. So we're in QView.
So in playback,
Yeah.
you can't move. You can still play another cue in the playback window, but it's doing it live. It's not doing it through QView. If that's
Yeah, it's your understanding is slightly. You're still playing here, just like you would be playing the normal buttons. So of course, if you click play here, you're still going to be playing Q2. It's just the same. It doesn't matter if you're in QView or not. It's not. This isn't blinding anything else in the console. This is just giving you a visual representation of what's in this queue list without you having to play it. So the queue view is just kind of in its own world in the tab that you're in. It's not affecting anything outside of this tab itself. So if you're playing buttons on the list, if you're playing cues from here, yeah, of course, you're going to see the output as expected.
there you go. Yep, that was it. Uh, change the tempo with a time fader in the console. So an effects fader or an effects master, uh, and adding the tap tempo, I believe is.
We've talked about this a few times. Let's just have a look at this here. So if I do, I'll do it quickly. Let's just do an intensity effect. We'll do, say one at a time, like in the right order. Okay, so the main thing is you want to be doing the effect rate per cycle because this is something that you want to tap. And then you need to assign this to an effects master. I've already got some here on my console, so let's go for intensity rate. Here it is. So now when I go to my intensity rate fader, which is this guy here, if I'm tapping this, I can accurately tap the rate of this. So that's exactly as I've just tapped it. Well, of course, you can have rate on the fader as well. So that's the way to do it. Link the effects master in the effects engine and critically set per fixture.
So another one here is brought up. When you have queues open for editing, first part of the question is, can you close all the queues, all the editing lists at the same time? Uh, that one, no. You have to close them individually. We'll come back to that other one. But when you hit a snapshot,
Mm-hmm.
does a snapshot close things that are open for editing?
No. Snapshots are only playback states or window spaces. So if I'm in the live tab, it wouldn't close this. No.
Okay. Uh,
Which I can demonstrate, I think. Maybe not.
fader where the clock is. Sorry, I'm trying to understand the question about the tap tempo. I think that he meant the super playback on that one.
That could be done, but it's not an effects master. So if I just edit this QDIS that I've just made, if I turn off the effects master for this, so now this is just linked to its own rate in this queue here. Um, in the super playback, you could affect the rate of this, but you would have to come into smart effects, SFX. You have to click enabled, and then you have sync here. So you can tap sync because it's still tap tempo. So you can see I'm still pressing it. And this is directly changing the rate of that effect in this list. Actually, no, it's different. It's setting that's all queues that are active or the queue list. I would have to go in and select my queue list itself. So I'd have to have that somewhere where I can select it. So my selected list, here it is. So now you're syncing just this queue list. Are you syncing the selected effects or all effects? Arguably, I think this is redundant in Vista 3. I'd advise using effects message. You've got much more control over it rather than doing that, but it's there if you want it.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. This is the old way of doing it before the effects masters. So it's a little less. There's a lot more. You had to go through a lot more stuff to get to that. than doing it on
And,
Effects Master.
and also, if I was tapping the selected effect, I would be only tapping this exact one. So if you've got a similar effect in the next cue, then you haven't affected that at all. You've just tapped the previous cue or selected cue. So Effects Master is a much better way of doing that. And certainly in the future releases, we give you much more control over that in the Effects Masters as well.
So another question here is naming pages. I assume you're referring to naming pages on the console, I think. No, we can't name pages right now. And the same queue on all pages.
The same queue on all pages we can lock. So if I lock list one, lock item, every time I go up, it is going to be locked in there. So I can see this is locked in to that playback, which is here.
Or you can put that same queue list on every page by dragging it. Yeah.
Or you can copy the page as well if you keep having it copy page, copy all pages.
But no, naming pages isn't something that's in there, because he was also asking about recalling pages by the name, which
It's not currently possible.
Yeah. And there was a question about any new consoles coming out in the near future.
Not in the near future. They are actively being worked on, but we don't know any timeframes on that yet.
Oh, there are no
Any
other
more
questions.
Cool.
Snapshot for recall pages, isn't it? That's the original usage of snapshots, was for just changing pages on your console surface.
Yeah, it's called console workspace. This is the pages. Console workspace is recalling pages, so it would recall what page you're in for each of these playback sections, and also what mode your super playback is in. Is it in IPCG or is it in QList playback mode like it is now?
What is the last fader on the right for?
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
It depends what mode you're in. So currently it's crossfade because it's using the master Q list. Typically, if you're in IPCG mode, so when you're in programming mode, this is live time. So it's that manual fade time. By default, it's 0 seconds, but it's a scale as well. So if it's 2 seconds at the top, it will be anything in between. So now anything that you do in the console, such as fade up, move to different colors, it's going to be using this lifetime to change that. And I was using snapshots earlier just to change the maximum time of what you're doing down here on these guys. Lifetime, by the way, is also what's used when we use our skip actions. So if I click this, it's not going to play in 2 seconds or indeed snap there. It's actually going to play Q4 in 10 seconds, which we can see fading in.
Just like the other faders, that's assignable. This is the default operation of it, is live time.
Mm-hmm. Any last questions? We good?
Nope, no other questions, right? I've seen in the webinar solo highlight. Can we see and merge queue? Oh, can we see and merge a queue in one queue?
Are they two separate questions?
I've seen the webinar. I've seen the webinar on solo highlight. Can we see and merge a queue in one queue? So solo highlight, I think, would be the first part.
Okay, so it's actually two functions. Let me just play a queue list here. So the first is solo, and it literally just solos the fixtures that you have selected. So let's just take a look. Let's just go back to, just stop these from moving for a second. Okay, so with solo highlight, it's tools and solo highlight, or control shift H down here. And that literally just solos the fixtures that you've got selected. As soon as you click off and make no selection, the fixtures will return to doing what they were programmed to do. So solo is literally just show me that. You can combine this with the highlight function. Let's just pop that on a key here. So, oops, there we go. So what highlight will do is highlight will turn any selected fixtures to become white, so useful for, you know, focusing and this type of stuff. It would also put the fixture to full if it's not full already, like these ones. So the only thing that solo does when you use these two together is you get the intensity rising to full, color changing to white, but with solo it will black out anything else. So you can use the two together or one or the other. You get different results, which is why they're separate actions, which is handy.
And the other half of that was merging two queues together.
Okay, so I'll show you how to do it. The question is why? Or my question will be why, and I'll explain why that is. So we've got two queues, red and yellow, and if I just make this a follow for a second, and I'll just do a follow of 1 second. So I've now got two queues showing in my timeline as this. So we can merge them. To merge the queues, what you do is you select them both by holding shift. You go to, is it component or where is it gone? It's tools, queues, and merge queues, like this. So you will get the merge, and you can see this in here, and you've now got the color. So you could now do whatever you like with these. So I'll just play it back. But it's tricky because you can see they start kind of colliding in with each other, and it's tricky to just update that one bit of it. Potentially, it's especially if they're so close to each other. And in my example, I made sure to put the follow in. Otherwise, you just get them stacked on top of each other, which perhaps isn't so useful. So it's possible. You can absolutely do it, and you can start lining stuff up here against time, but I'd question why, given that it's so much easier to manage your show file with them as two separate queues like this. So I could still do the same thing, exactly the same, but it's really easy for me to work with it in this second queue. And I could still use the kind of start queue time if I wanted that to trigger at, say, 1 second. If I want this to happen at 1 second, I'd just use a start time of 1. So this is going to start playing at this point here, which would look like this. So the result is exactly the same, but I got it in two queues. It's really easy for me to manage, and I can clearly see what's happening. Is it possible to merge stuff? Yeah, but I recommend doing it this way.
The other challenge with merging, especially if you've the two parameters in the same queue, if you select that one queue and go to change something, like say when you had the red and yellow together, if you want to change it to blue, it basically wipes out everything you just did and changes everything to blue. So doing it with two parameters is very tough. It might make more sense if you're doing it with you had pan in one queue and color in another queue, and you decided, I want to put those two together. Then it might have more function, but beyond that, it can be a challenge. So yeah, I think that takes care of it.
Cool.
We have used our time for this one. We did a webinar earlier on extracts. I'd say probably it's better to go back and look at those just because that gets really into a lot of time on demonstrating those, and we spent a lot more time on extracts.
It is on the YouTube channel.
Yes. That's something that's hard to just show with a couple of minutes. So yeah, you need more time to see what those do.
Cool.
All right, well, I think that's it.
Excellent. Thank you once again, guys, and we'll hopefully see you next time.